Hello and welcome to this episode of the Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers edition. I'm Marina Hyde.
And I'm Richard Osman. So many messages from last week when I talked about showing television in cinemas. So many messages personally, so many messages to the website. People are going crazy for it. I think it's going to happen. We're not going to make a penny from it.
No.
Actually, why would you make money from it?
What?
Hold on a minute. You're trying to muscle in on this.
You bounced the idea off me. That's the thing.
Yeah, I bounced it.
That's the thing. I helped you build your business.
And you said that's a terrible idea.
Well, that isn't... Yeah, and you push back.
Anyway, people are telling us all sorts of things that they go to the cinema for.
What a sparring partner is. It's a thing. In boxing and in, business development, I understand.
If Rory had an idea...
Why don't always start it like that, but carry on.
Do you think for
if
one
Rory
second...
Would,
do you think for 1 second that Alistair Campbell will get 8% of anything Rory ever thought of?
I've thought of a number of answers to this question and I can't say any of them out loud. Shall I just go with I don't know, Richard?
Yeah, good one. The Odeon on Lothian Road in Edinburgh, they use it for jury selection.
Do they actually?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, isn't it? That came from one of our listeners.
Wow. Diversifying cinemas, how interesting.
Yeah, it's just a room full of seats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is it? Or is it all those wonderful people out there in the dark, Richard?
It's a theatre of dreams, but also really good for jury selection. Now, last week we were talking about dust jackets.
Yes.
And you said, by the way, I wish someone would ask why are books rectangular, because I have an answer to it.
Yeah.
So we said if anyone wants their name read out on this podcast, just write in why the hell are books rectangular.
Yeah.
We asked people to write.
We tried to make it sound like an action movie.
It is fair to say an awful lot of people wrote exactly that question, so we had to go with the first person who sent that in. Right. So John T. Smith has a question for you, Marina.
Right.
And John T. Smith's question is, would you mind explaining to me why the hell books are rectangles?
John T., thank you so much. Now, they are rectangles and... We'll talk about the ratio of the...
Can I say, by the way, my answer to that would be, well, because of course they are. So I assume there's something more than that.
Okay, yeah. But the ratio is interesting, all this thing. Anyway, actually, papyrus was square, right?
Was it papyrus?
Yes, papyrus was square. Greek scrolls, there were scrolls, so that's a very... it is a rectangle.
It's a long rectangle.
It's a very long rectangle, and it's
so
a different proportion. It's not the 5/8 proportion or the 2/3 proportions that you might see.
But what's a papyrus? The scrolls were made of papyrus, weren't they?
What? Scrolls were made of papyrus? Yeah. Yes, scrolls were made of papyrus.
Yeah.
When it was in sheets, it was in squares, but when Greek scrolls, it depends on which culture or which civilization you're talking about. Egyptian scrolls, they read left to right, and it was in columns down the scroll. So by the time you get to parchment, which is...
Finally, by the time you get to parchment, your catchphrase finally pays off.
Wall-to-wall showbiz this week.
What's parchment?
Parchment's got animal skin in it, and therefore the stretching, the particular means they used to stretch it, made it more oblong, okay?
If you're making this up, it's very impressive.
It's like, will I lie to you? But reading rectangles are the best way to organise both reading and writing. And now do you know about the golden ratio as a thing?
That's a facial thing.
It's called phi, or sometimes phi in mathematics, PHI. That's the Greek letter that's used to symbolise it. And it's roughly speaking, it's 2 to 3, okay? That's roughly speaking is a golden ratio. And it's a sort of obsessed mathematical thinkers. It's all connected with Fibonacci numbers. You see it in lots of things. Architecture, Le Corbusier was fascinated by the golden ratio. Salvador Dali's Last Supper, it all conforms in these kind of obscure ways to the golden ratio. Also, though, music and things like posters, widescreen TVs. Anyway, the other way round. The other way round, but there's a reason it sort of works. Anyway, but there are obviously practical reasons. If it's wider than it is tall,
this is amazing, Jonty. Thank you so much for asking this question.
But if it's wider than it is tall, then there's too much pressure on the spine. Yeah, I've lost a lot of copies of Goodnight Moon to this exact problem, and I taped a lot of them up, and this is what happens. Okay?
Goodnight Moon.
Mainly, it's like ergonomic. Who is reading them? We need our hands like this. Blah blah, and then. And
our hands are rectangles, really, in some ways. In terms of how the pressure that can be put on them.
Quite right.
Yeah, it's a rectangular pressure.
But it's the movement of the eyes. Now, I am conscious of talking to you about this because you'll say to me, well, my eyes don't move in this way. But in general, people's eyes is called saccading. After a certain length...
It's like a TED Talk.
It's silly.
It's like a disorganised TED Talk.
That's quite right. Okay. After a certain length of line, your eye gets lost and it finds it hard to reconnect with the start of the new line, but also too short and your eye is distracted by the different line lengths. And you sometimes get that thing. Do you ever get that thing where for some reason you reply to certain emails and for whatever reason, the system that you've replied to means that there's a really, really long email and you have to kind of scroll along the bottom.
I can't bear it.
What the hell is happening here?
Yeah.
There is a certain length that is, and I'm saying this for people without your condition, but the eye can hook round the most easily and not flick around. There's a certain form of mathematical, not just satisfaction, but rationality, which is the golden ratio, which books are generally in the golden ratio. All of that has to work, and that's why we have our golden ratio books.
Are you happy with that, John T? Glad you asked. So books are in the golden ratio. Okay, I love it.
Look, and lots of things are, and actually the golden ratio is such an interesting thing to read about. It's this kind of harmonious proportions, and it's very, very interesting to delve into.
I'm sure the golden ratio is also I can order from it on my Deliveroo.
Yeah,
I think
it
so.
really does sound like that, doesn't it? Question for you, Richard, from Scott about the trade war. Rumours are floating about that China could ban American movies. What would the impact be to Hollywood?
It would be substantial. The impact on Hollywood is the truth. Certainly, it's not an impact if you're in an industry that's not in the best shape anyway, not an impact that you would welcome. In China, they go and see a lot of movies. It's still a huge deal in China to see movies. Most of it is domestic, but it's 17 billion is the cumulative box office in China any given year.
There was a point where they were building 600 movie theatres a week.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Now, almost all of them being used to show episodes of television programmes. 17
you
billion
will
a year.
make this happen, won't you?
Yeah, I will
you will make it happen.
Even if I have to relocate to China. To put that into perspective, 17 billion, the American box office is about 9 billion, something like that. So it's almost double the size of US box office. So an awful lot of people in China watch movies. As I say, most of it is domestic, but allowed films that go over there.
They had a quota. They have a quota system, but the quota is not functioning in the same way it used to. In the older days, it mattered so much that you got your movie into China. So much, and now less so. I mean, so the Minecraft movie. I don't know. The Minecraft movie probably which was one of the movies they've allowed in because they don't allow lots and lots of movies in. That I think took 20 million. Of course, is not nothing. It's about a fifth of what the US box office was this particular week. Yeah,
and it's one of those things. It would cost, if you want to put an exact figure on it, it would cost about $500 million to the US movie industry. It's not an enormous amount, but it's also not nothing when you think about the state the industry is in at the moment. So if China were to ban movies now, what China have actually said was, we will limit them appropriately. Is the language they use. We will limit them appropriately. And appropriately is a word often used in Chinese diplomacy, which sort of means anything.
Yeah.
It sort of means we can completely row back from this and not ban anything at all, or we could put a complete blanket ban.
I parent like this entirely. Yes. This is exactly how I parent.
Yeah.
It could mean anything.
Yeah, I'm going to limit your pudding appropriately.
This is a ridiculous holding position that allows me to do anything in the future.
They've definitely spoken about limiting American movies. It might not happen at all. It might also cost them $500 million, but it's certainly money that Hollywood wouldn't want to lose. But at the moment, listen, we'll see where that trade war goes. It'd be fairly easy for the Chinese to target American movies.
Hollywood was so happy about Trump, weren't they? There's lots of those executives thought, we'll get to do all the M&A stuff that we think is really essential for us to be able to survive. Whereas it's like now, like Disney are like, sorry, we need a lot of steel for our parks and cruises. Yes. A lot.
Yeah.
We're in the entertainment business. We are all in the ad business. And therefore, you've just messed up the ad. But anyone who's in the entertainment business, basically, at those studios are in the ad business. And he's just made it incredibly difficult for them. So
yeah, if you imagine you're one of those execs as well, you've got these two things which you think, well, look, if Trump gets in, it's good for us because this is going to be great at a corporate level. You know, there is going to be more money. And so Trump gets in, and so now they're thinking, it's actually really bad for us economically. And they think about, they've still got the thing of every single person who works for them, pretty much 95% of people who work for them are absolutely furious about Trump getting in as well. So they're like, oh God, now I'm getting it from both sides. Yeah. Like everybody hates me. No one's helping me out here. We weep for them, do we not?
We also cry for them.
Yeah, it's quite a soft target, but the Chinese do like having Western movies coming into the country. It gives them sort of an illusion that there is some freedom of choice, and that's quite a powerful thing. But yeah, appropriately, if you ever you hear that in a Chinese context, that as you
or
say
indeed
is
a parenting one.
Yeah, that's essentially, let's talk about it when your mum gets home. In terms of theme parks, which we talked about on Tuesday's show, there's the big Disney theme parks in Shanghai and in Hong Kong, and obviously if you were to lose Disney IP, that would be a huge deal. That I don't think is at risk. If that's at risk, then the trade war has got we got bigger problems. It feels like there are accommodations to be made there. A question for you, Marina, from Stephen Coyne, which I don't think is crypto, but you never know. I invested.
It's a Stephen Coyne.
Stephen Coyne, yeah. That's oh my God, my Stephen Coyne has gone crazy. We're riding this to the moon. That is quite something. Stephen says, how much work goes into a future series of a show during the first series production? For example, did the writing team of the franchise think about what would happen after the cliffhanger of season 1?
Anything I've ever been involved with, yes, you're thinking ahead. By the way, you could throw that all in the air, and I'll come to that in a minute. Jesse Armstrong doing Succession, he knew roughly where it was going. And I mean, it's kind of up there in the title, but he knew roughly where it was going. Obviously, every season you think, how are we turning this wheel this time? And anything can get thrown out.
Because it's tricky on the series 1 thing, because every time you launch a series 1, you're like, oh, I hope this runs forever and ever and ever. And that thing of when you go, well, let's work out what would happen in series 2, but in some ways it feels like bad luck.
It absolutely feels like sort of bad juju, and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to say anything. And you have to constantly catch yourself the way you're talking about it. I mean, I've had ideas for like pilots that I was already thinking what could happen that would completely upend everything in season 2. In the franchise, we definitely had a full idea of, well, not a full idea, but roughly where it was going. Then again, I was remembering right in the middle of the night when I was thinking about this particular question, right back at the start of development, I remember Sam Mendes and Armando Iannucci, with one of the things we were saying is like, maybe it could be on a different type of movie. Maybe they could then be doing a children's franchise or a kind of like muscle car franchise or whatever it is. There were all sorts of different ways you could do it. I would say that in general, every time, and I know people who are working on some of the big successful US dramas at the moment, you get to the end of a season, nothing is set in stone. You don't then say, if there's source material like there was in sort of Game of Thrones or whatever, then you sort of know what's going to happen. Equally, everything, in my experience and in most people's, it can be back on the table. And if things haven't worked, one of the things they often say to you is, what about a time jump? Because let's leave this mess of your first season behind and kind of try and put it on a different footing. For whatever reason, there's lots of different things you can do. And nothing, I think most writers would say to you, nothing can be off the table. And, the way it goes, the way it's received, if you're lucky enough to have any sort of off season, you might think, oh, hang on, maybe the currents of the age are going a different way, and you suddenly think, oh, this would be a fun way to take it. And what's best is when you can always say, let's do this totally different thing. Having said that, I do think you're always thinking to some extent in a path, even if you're not voicing it out loud because you don't want to jinx it. Yeah,
you're setting things up. You're thinking characters who are slightly underused in a season, and when you're filming, everyone goes, oh my God, we absolutely love this character. And all the writers are like, oh, we want to write more for that character. That character needs a bigger arc in season 2. And then you stop maybe in the last episode, you introduce them a little bit more.
Or people talk about configurations. We haven't seen, especially when you get into long running, you haven't seen much of those two together, because what you're trying to say is, these two random two who we don't really often, what would happen if we throw them together and we give them a story that has to play out, it gives you different dynamics.
It's always the most fun thing in books is when you've got two characters who never had a scene together. You think, oh my God, this would be fun. I remember on the first Thursday Murder Club, I obviously wanted to write a series, but it's not in your gift, as you know. And so I left enough open-ended, but I didn't do anything that, sometimes when you watch something or read something and at the end you go, oh, there's a sequel, is there? Because there's something unanswered or undone. And I made sure I didn't do any of that just in case I was caught by my own hubris. So, you have to sort of hide the fact that you want a sequel as well. When I did Boys Unlimited, the sitcom, and the first series came out in 1998, and that was a shoe-in for a second series. It didn't happen, spoiler alert. But we'd started some of the pre-preparation for the next series, which was going to be a girl band competing with the boy band of Boys Unlimited.
There's so many things you want to see.
But also because it was coming out in 1999, they were going to do a boy band version of 1999 by Prince with a double A side with a boy band version of Auld Lang Syne. which was the thing I was most looking forward to, putting together.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, God, obviously, I love all these lost things that never happen.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting, things that had first series. There are so many lost storylines and lost characters who were never coming back. Perhaps there's a show in that.
And the franchise, from being the unloved thing, they became the sort of tentpole, and that was going to be much more about, you get everything you wish for, and you get all the money and all the technocranes and all the
is that going to be
power.
Season 2 of the franchise? Suddenly it's the biggest movie in the world.
Suddenly you've replaced, you are the tentpole, you're the sort of whatever. So we thought that would give us something different. But equally, you never know. If you had got a second thing, you might have gone back and said, "Oh, let's change this totally." Yeah. It's always good to be able to have the scope to totally just rethink it.
And people, you could see in the first season of Lost, and there are other examples of it, where they throw everything. They just say, you know what, we're just going to throw everything at this. And you think we can work out the problems in season 2, and sometimes it takes a while. So yeah, sometimes you set things up which are never, ever going to be seen ever again. And sometimes you just go, please, God, give us a second series. And I'm aware there's a absolutely gaping logic flaw here somewhere that people need us to fix. But that's a problem for next year's me.
Yeah.
Shall we go to a break and hope we got a part 2 of this episode?
Let's hope we have a sequel to this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the narrative arc in the second half. This episode is brought to you by Sky, where you can watch the highly anticipated second season of the award-winning The Last of Us.
Richard, I am very excited that The Last of Us is back on our screens. I watched the entire first series. It was emotional. It was bleak. It was brilliant TV. It follows Joel, played by Pedro Pascal, who is tasked with escorting Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey, who's a teenage girl. She's immune to a deadly infection, and he has to transport her across a post-apocalyptic America in which they face these infected clickers and much more.
And season 2, I think, picks up 5 years later. They're living in a community of survivors.
Time jump.
Time jump. It's probably 5 years since they filmed the first one. So it's fair enough, isn't it?
Now, from what I hear, my nerves, the second season sounds like it's going to be even more intense. There's conflict brewing everywhere, not just on the outside with the infected and all the different factions among them, but inside between Joel and Ellie too.
Yes, if you're into emotional gut punches, high-stakes world building and brilliant performances, this show is for you.
Watch the brand new series of the award-winning The Last of Us, available on Sky now. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
After a time jump. It's now 5 years later.
Yes. Can I ask a question? Why are books all now square? That's something that's happened, isn't it? Like in the last 18 months or so, after the end of the trade war.
Well, as the CEO of TED Talks, which is, as you know, enjoyed a huge revival under my leadership.
And by the way, lovely to have you in so many of my cinemas.
Can I ask you something about actors with tattoos,
you
Richard?
Can, yes.
Because Paul would like to know. Tattoos.
People have been very, very lax with surnames.
It's almost like they don't want you to do a 4-minute riff and say, right, I'm putting you in my book as a sort of, homicidal snooker player in the next,
Hold on a minute.
Actually, hang on a second.
That's a great idea, a homicidal snooker player.
Why have you got a snooker cue? Because I play snooker. It's nothing more sinister than that.
Yeah, why have you got a long case carrying something? But listen, I was fine. Stephen Coyne, he gave his surname. He got away scot-free.
All right, well, Paul hasn't.
Let's imagine he's got a surname.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul Scot-free. It's a double barrel.
Paul Scot-free.
Paul Scot-free. Paul Scot-free says, tattoos are now incredibly common, particularly with younger adults.
Aren't they?
Would an actor with prominent tattoos be automatically excluded from some roles? If they were otherwise perfect for the role, but they had a huge tattoo across their chest, which might require shirtless scenes, would casting directors still consider the actor or decide that the makeup editing is not worth it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because all young people have tattoos. You can't watch a football match now. The sleeves on people, I mean, it's unbelievable. Actors are told not to have tattoos. Agents will say if you can avoid, huge body art, then it's probably best because you can put makeup over them. But obviously, the more tattoos you have, if you're going to be in Bridgerton and you've got, sleeves and back just covered in tattoos, then your costume sort of could cover it up. But what if you've got tattoos on your hands? There's all sorts of roles where it would
Chris
be
Evans
an issue.
has absolutely loads, but you're Chris Evans and you're in a Marvel movie. But what you're buying yourself is an extra hour in the chair every single day.
Exactly that. So you will find that actors have fewer tattoos than, say, footballers or normal members of the human race.
Civilians, let's call them.
Civilians, let's call them. Angelina Jolie has got a lot. Sometimes her character, Fox, which is in the Wanted movie, her tattoos become part of her character and part of her plot, not the Billy Bob Thornton tattoo. But the interesting thing with tattoos is that the other difficult issue is they are actually copyrighted. Anytime you see a tattoo, it belongs to the artist who tattooed that on you. So actually showing...
Is that true? I did not know that.
It is. Well, The Hangover got in trouble. Ed Helms wakes up with that Mike Tyson face tattoo, and the Hangover producers were sued. There's a guy called Victor Whitmill who created that tattoo, and the Hangover producers had to settle out of court with Victor.
Well, that's a hit.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's one of those things where you will find that actors have fewer tattoos than other people. It is an enormous pain. I guess you could take them out with CGI, but if you're an actor, you are discouraged from having too many tattoos, which, in the music business and the football business, you are not discouraged.
If you want to be the US Secretary of Defence, though, just, keep getting them. I can't. Yeah. The sleeves, the Crusades tattoos. Yeah, I mean...
I think if you were a time traveller from the 1970s, you crash landed in 2025, of all the things that would surprise you, and there would be an awful lot, I bet the main thing would be watching the football and seeing that literally every single person has arms full of tattoos. You'd be like, wow, I didn't see that coming.
I genuinely think it would be that the US Defence Secretary's got a neck tattoo or something. I mean, no, I'm sorry. I think if you're from that, sort of post-war, Eisenhower generation, you're like, sorry, now what?
Yeah. You've got a what now?
You've got a what now?
By the way, I was say in future, if you do send in just your first name, I will provide a surname for you. You get more of an idea of someone if you get the surname as well, don't you?
Richard will fit you with a surname, whether you wish to be or not.
I will retrofit. It'll be a cut and shut. It might be completely inappropriate, but listen, that's the risk you take.
The old Osman nomenclature chop shop. If you don't want to be grafted onto the body of something completely different.
Did you say that the old Osman nomenclature? Did you say the old Osman nomenclature?
What I said.
I don't know. Forget it.
It's not the repair shop, is it? It's not as catchy.
Wow, nomenclature is a hard thing to say. The nomenclature chop. Try saying, everyone at home, try saying nomenclature chop shop. You did amazingly.
No.
That's a skill you didn't know you had.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay, we move on to someone who has provided us with a surname, and what a surname as well. Richard Herring, the wonderful podcaster and comedian. He asks this.
Hi guys, a long-time listener, first-time caller. Richard Herring here. On Instagram, I keep on seeing clips of films and sitcoms where they allege that a bit was improvised during filming, but they always seem to be well captured by the film crew. Are any of them actual examples of total spontaneity in the moment? I accept some may have been improvised in rehearsals, but given the little I know about filming stuff, none of the ones I've seen seem to be real. Did Aniston really not know a dummy was about to be thrown downstairs? I mean, that's about the best one I can think of. Did Johnny Depp improvise falling down some steps, even though it's filmed from about 16 angles? They are relentless and I think quite offensive to the actors and writers who are often accused of corpsing when they're just laughing in character or whatever. Anyway, love the show, Steve. Keep up the good work. This is me, Richard Herring. Goodbye.
Okay, well, I do think that some of the...
Those drive me mad, by the way. Instagram is full of people saying they didn't even know the cameras were on, or these two actors went completely off script.
You can always tell. If there's something like a single camera sitcom, I don't know, something like The Office, then you can see how they get it. If there's lots of cameras, then of course not. It's much harder. It reminds me of that bit in Broadcast News. Do you remember where he interviews a rape victim and then he's shown crying on the footage, and then she works out that actually they only had one camera, so he's faked his tears because and that's a sort of plot point there. But there is a really big tradition, as we've talked about before, in American comedy of improv, and certain people they'll do all the proper takes and they'll get the coverage and everything, and then for their own coverage they'll say, can we do a loose one, can we do a loose take? And someone like Kieran Culkin in Succession was absolutely brilliant at improvising. They ended up losing lots of his things. There's a bit in Community, Abed's trying to work out whether Nicolas Cage is a good or a bad actor. And they knew that he was going to do this big sort of monologue at the end. It was set up, but they didn't know what he was going to say. It's absolutely, go and watch that clip. It's absolutely brilliant. They didn't know, and he didn't know. He was so in depth into like the Nicolas Cage thing at that time. There's a scene in season 3, I think, of The US Office where Michael's accidentally outed Oscar within the office as being gay. There's a sort of, denouement of it all. And then he actually ends up kissing Oscar, which it wasn't at all scripted, is completely improvised. If you look, because remember it's single camera, so you're able to see, some of the cast break character completely because it's just so ridiculous. It's a sort of a brilliant sort of iconic scene. A really famous one, it ended up being part of a cold open in Friends. Billy Crystal and Robin Williams, they had a movie called like Father's Day, which was for some engagement to do with it or whatever. They were on the lot and the producers, the writers saw them and they went onto the Friends set and they said, will you do a bit? And they're on the sofa and they're these two friends and they completely, they are obviously genuine comic geniuses and they improvise this extraordinary thing about this guy who's saying, and Monica's trying to tell an anecdote, I think this is if memory serves, Monica's trying to tell some anecdote about something that happened to her. They get so sucked into these two guys having the conversation where he's saying, my wife's sleeping with someone else, I think is a gynecologist, and then it becomes clear that actually the person he's sleeping with is the other one, and it becomes this thing, and then they break up their friendship, and then they leave, and then Monica's like, I can't remember what I was going to say now. But that's a simple shot. Again, what you're saying, Richard, there's bits like, yes, if there's a camera at the top of the stairs, maybe they did it in rehearsals, but then you knew it was going to happen. But that is a sort of fairly simple frame shot of the sofa of these two people interacting. So it is possible. So yes, lots of times they kind of come at the end in a sort of loose take, often those kind of great improvised moments.
When you've got the shot, so you've got it, so you've got the storyline, you've got the script as was written, and then you try extra things. But often on Instagram, there are those things where people say, oh, the two actors just completely changed what was happening. And then, they'll go somewhere and there'll be a fire outside. You think, well, obviously that's not improvised.
They've hit every mark.
Yeah. And also
there are 3 cameras on this.
And also every writer who's ever lived, when they're going, that was the script we wrote, pretty much. Not everybody is Steve Carell. Yeah. And like you were talking about Jason Momoa doing improv in the Minecraft movie, not all actors can do it.
Well, audiences aren't hating it. Well, they're suddenly turning out for it. Who knows? Who knows how much of that script he improvised?
But one of my favourite things in the world is just to watch, the American Office bloopers. I mean, you spend forever. They're
all absolutely brilliant and they love to do it like that. And, actually American actors in UK sitcoms will often ask for takes like that at the end when they know they've got everything, because it's so in their blood and their bones and their sort of training that they just want to do improv takes at the end.
Yeah, and also to try and make each other laugh. There's lots in, the Anchorman outtakes where you've got to do a list or you've got to give an example of something, and every single take, Will Ferrell will give a different example of the thing just to try and break everybody else. And those, I'll watch those all day.
You want a name? Because here's a name.
Oh, great.
And by the way, I'm going to mispronounce it. I'm so sorry. Tallinn Aslanian or Aslanian. Either way, I love it.
That's a good name.
Yeah, that's also a question.
I'd be happy if I came up with that.
I'd really love to know how cinemas actually play the physical films. Are they downloaded onto a system? Has someone plugged in a memory stick? How do cinemas stop employees sending themselves a copy to watch at home?
It used to be, of course, that cinemas, took reels of film, and which were incredibly long and incredibly heavy. Each reel would be about 2,000 feet worth of film. So the average film would weigh about 30 kilograms. Titanic, which is 3 hours and 15 minutes long, that was 17 reels. So it means the theatrical release was over 3 miles of film. So every single cinema showing that has got 3 miles of film that they have to spool up and respool, and that doesn't happen anymore. Everything is now digital. What you actually get is a thing called a DCP, which is a digital cinema package. The distributors and the studios put together. That contains all the video, audio, all the subtitles, any metadata you need. So that gets sent to individual cinemas, this DCP. And Tallinn's question of, can you steal it? Firstly, every single one is unique to the cinema itself, so they know exactly what copy has gone to exactly what cinema. The password is unique to that cinema as well, so if anything ever turns up elsewhere, they'll know. It is also time locked, so if a distributor is giving a film to a cinema for 3 weeks, at the end of 3 weeks, it disappears. It no longer exists. You can't just keep it on your system or anything like that. So they're very, very good at understanding what pirates would like to do. Very easy to get a job in a cinema and steal a movie. And so they make it impossible to do. So it is all digital. It gets downloaded. You've got a password, but it is unique. Your copy of it is completely marked. Everyone knows exactly where it came from. Everyone knows exactly who's had access to it. And it disappears in a puff of smoke afterwards. Because people used to steal reels of movies all the time.
Wow, it's self-destruct after watching or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. The Return of the Jedi, that was stolen at gunpoint during transit. Yeah, Return of the Jedi.
Stolen at gunpoint?
Yeah, and someone tried to sell that. I mean, that's a weird thing to sell. I mean, Pasolini is the 120 Days of Sodom. That was stolen. He was murdered, of course, Pasolini, around the time that was stolen as well. And he was investigating it. There's lots of other theories as to why he was murdered. But that's certainly one of them. That took a dark turn, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Italian. Yeah, well, you were just asking about digital password protection. And suddenly we're on brutal murders of Italian film directors.
That's the magic of theatres.
That's what happens if you give us a surname.
Right, I think that is about us for today, but we will be back with a bonus episode about the island of Dr. Moreau. It's going to be a two-parter because it's that troubled.
It's one of the craziest stories in the history of cinema.
It's crazy. It's absolutely mad. Other than that, if you're not signed up to our club, thererestisенtertainment.com, we will see you as usual next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.